A reading from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. Jesus told the crowds all these things in parables. Without a parable, he told them nothing. This was to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth to speak in parables. I will proclaim what has been hidden from the foundation of the world. And if you have been listening to this daily reading and sermon these last few days, you'll know just how true it is that at this point in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus is on a roll with parables. He told them another and another and another parable, culminating in 2 very brief parables that we've heard this morning. Parables he tells, so it is explained to us, to fulfill a prophecy about making clear a truth that has been the case since the very beginning of time, since the foundation of the world. And the truths that he's trying to make clear are to do with what he calls the kingdom of heaven, or more about how we could build something like the kingdom of heaven right here on earth in this life. And certainly one overriding truth which comes out of those 2 brief parables I just read, one overriding truth is that it isn't always about huge, great acts of heroism. Sometimes following Christ does demand major sacrifices. Sometimes it is extremely costly and requires vast amounts of effort. When you look at the story of, and I pluck just one name from the air, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., you see the heroic cost of a life cut short to do the right thing and build the kingdom of heaven, and a life that while it was being lived was extremely costly and very heroic. But that is not the only way God calls us to act. That's not the only way God calls us to build the kingdom of heaven. I've been ordained for just over a quarter of a century, to my surprise. And there have been a few wonderful moments over the 25 years when people have said to me or written to me or emailed me to say something like, "Do you remember the time when you said to me," or "Do you remember what you said in a sermon 15 years ago?" And for that person, a little chance remark, a line in a sermon, has touched their life and shown them something for which they were seeking and really helped them turn a corner or turn themselves around or start down a new path or whatever it might be. And I know that experience myself from those times when I have heard the line in somebody else's sermon, or a brief, kind greeting or simple word of advice has been the profound thing I needed to hear. And I have said to other people, "Do you remember when you said to me?" And they've paused. And if they've been honest, they've said, "Well, no, I don't actually, but I'm glad it worked out like that." Sometimes building the kingdom of heaven is something which can be done very simply, provided it is done in a Christ-like way. Like many others, I took to baking during the lockdown. Unlike quite a few who did it properly, I bought a bread machine, so it was all done for me. But I have now seen at first hand just how true it is that you need a tiny amount of yeast to leaven a loaf. Without the yeast, all you have is a soggy and sticky mess. But with a tiny bit of yeast, you can get a glorious, wonderful loaf to eat. Jesus' parable makes perfect sense sometimes. We are called always to be Christ-like and to build the kingdom of heaven. Sometimes it needs to be costly. Sometimes it just needs us to be Christ-like. And if we don't notice the impact it has on others, let's hope that they might do and have a reason to give thanks to God for the encouragement we can offer. Amen.